Oh, here. I don't want to know where. Oh my God.
All right. This should all be a review from 1050 and from your A&P course, but in case it's not, it's always good to go back through it. This is, I think, chapter 3, maybe in Colbert. How many people have actually opened the book?
Wonderful.
Good read. It's a very easy read, very down to earth. One day I'll scare you and I'll bring a copy of Rao's Pharmacology down, and you can take a look at the same material, and it's written in a foreign language. It's like worse than Egan. So, central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. These are the efferent motor nerves. And then there's the peripheral nervous system, which is basically outside of the brain, the spinal cord, that communicates in a sensory mechanism, afferent. And that peripheral, we know, has two subdivisions, the somatic, which is voluntary, and the autonomic, which is involuntary. Here you can see in red the central nervous system, the green being the peripheral nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic and sympathetic, are part of the peripheral, but they kind of mimic the spinal cord as far as their locations. So this is kind of how it's broken down. And we know that as you have a situation where you feel a hot plate, that impulse gets transported back to the brain. The brain then sends an impulse back to tell you to, hey, move your hand away in the process. Some of those voluntary muscles, those somatic, your skeletal muscles would be example. The autonomic is ones that we can't control voluntarily. And basically, they're the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, and the sympathetic, the fight or flight. These are afferent and efferent. There's only one junction in the somatic, and acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter, so that's pretty easy. On the other hand, we end up having the parasympathetic. Let's see if this will work. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic is part of the autonomic, fight or flight, or rest and digest. This is Colbert's website, in case you haven't. Colbert. Kind of like not. Kind of like not. So here I have an airway of sympathetic stimulation, where that impulse is stimulated, the preganglion, there's acetylcholine at the neuromuscular or neuro effector site, and then we end up having norepinephrine released, and you end up having that nerve stimulated. So that's the sympathetic. The postganglionic neuron is stimulated, norepinephrine is released, and that's the hitting the effector organ in that process. On the parasympathetic side, same airway, but as that is stimulated, now acetylcholine is released in the preganglionic neuron to the postganglionic, that synapse, and then acetylcholine is eventually released, causing an effect on the airway to cause it to become bronchoconstricted. So sympathetic would cause bronchodilation, parasympathetic would cause bronchoconstriction. So that's the website. And there's other effects that have on various other organs. You should, this is kind of probably a good one to kind of pay attention to. Table 3.1 on page 52, I believe. But you should have an idea as far as if I'm stimulating a parasympathetic, or I'm sorry, a sympathetic response, what else is going to happen, say, to the bladder? It's going to relax the bladder. So you end up having release. Piloerection, my favorite words. Then we end up having, again, this kind of just showing on the various sides. Parasympathetic coming off the cranial nerves, the sympathetic coming off of primarily the thoracic and to some extent the lumbar and sacral also. sympathetic discharge. Peripulation is another term for that, as is cutis anserina, excuse me, which is basically goose flesh. Piloerection. Nervous system conduction. We know that there's a couple of junctions there on the parasympathetic and sympathetic system. And the two neurotransmitters, remember, are acetylcholine and norepinephrine. This is kind of just showing the receptors on the preganglionic and on the postganglionic. Red being the sympathetic, has a acetylcholine junction at the very first, and that's a nicotinic receptor site. And then on the adrenergic site is what is occurring at the target organ. So when we have a sympathetic discharge, for instance, passes through this nicotinic site and stimulates, let's say, the heart with a beta 1 and beta 1 stimulation to cause an increase in rate and increase in force contraction, excuse me. On the other hand, the black is the parasympathetic, or the black and blue here, and we have a nicotinic, and over here we have a muscarinic. So if you think of it being at the muscle, well, it's not really at the muscle necessarily, but you end up having acetylcholine and acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is the primary neurotransmitter, with the exception of a sympathetic and the postganglionic at the effector site. We good on that? I think I might have blown that up in the back for you, if you really care. It took me all of about an hour to construct, so you should appreciate it. This is what we've just been talking about, so there shouldn't be anything new there. Epinephrine can't be substituted for norepinephrine, although primarily it's norepinephrine in the postganglionic and sympathetic nerve fiber. And this is just another picture of exactly that same thing. Just so we're clear, acetylcholine in this pre-ganglionic is a nicotinic site, and at the effector it's a muscarinic. Nicotinic and muscarinic. Because we'll come across drugs which work on either end of that process. So acetylcholine, we can also call that a cholinergic site, just giving it some fancy names. And then norepinephrine, or epinephrine as an alternative, we call those adrenergic sites, and there's three primary ones that we have: alpha, beta 1, and beta 2. And you should know that alpha will constrict blood vessels, specifically the arterioles. Beta 1 will stimulate the heart to increase the rate and the force of contraction, and beta 2 causes a stimulation of or an enlargement of the airways. And yet another picture of it. For God's sakes, stop the madness. And this is right out of your text, so you can go back and take a picture of it. Okay. And there it went. So much for the numbers, guys. That's odd. It usually does it right at the beginning if it's going to do it at all. Zoom in there. This is just another expression of exactly the same information. The sympathetic on the left-hand side has acetylcholine, the preganglionic, norepinephrine, the postganglionic. So it's preganglionic nicotinic, and a postganglionic alpha, beta 1, beta 2. They have them depicted as just one beta, but it actually is a couple separate ones. Parasympathetic as a neurotransmitter of the acetylcholine, and the preganglionic making a nicotinic, and the postganglionic being muscarinic, and the somatic only has one, and it's a nicotinic receptor of the acetylcholine. Those adrenergic, again, due to the stimulation from norepinephrine, or possibly epinephrine, and any drug that mimics that effect, we're going to call an adrenergic or sympathomimetic drug. These are examples of our bronchodilators. Any drug that antagonizes that adrenergic receptor site are called anti-adrenergics, what a novel idea, or sympatholytics. Lytic to lyse, to break up, to tie up, to prevent, as you were. There really is there are other types of adrenergic receptors other than alpha, beta 1, and beta 2. An example is a dopaminergic receptor site found in renal tissue that causes the efferent and afferent arterioles to relax, or causing them to relax. So you have an increase in renal perfusion with the ultimate plan of having an increase in urine output. Don't need to worry about dopaminergic at this point in time. Cholinergic, on the other hand, it has to do with the release of acetylcholine in the postganglionic, that muscarinic site. And any drug that mimics the effects of acetylcholine, or would do it the same way, would be cholinergic or parasympathomimetic. And these would be examples of something that induces bronchoconstriction, causes the airways to close down in diameter. And any drug that blocks cholinergic receptor sites, ties them up, we're going to call anticholinergics or parasympatholytics. And one of the drugs that we're going to come across is something called ipratropium bromide, or Atrovent. It's a drug that has a synergistic effect with albuterol when administered together. Interesting. So the effects, this is one that you probably should have an idea of what's going to happen if you have an alpha stimulation. Primarily the vascular smooth muscle will contract. You will have pupillary dilation, mydriasis. And we talked about the goose shivers, or goose bumps. Beta 1, rate and force of contraction. Beta 2 causes bronchodilation. Also has the added side effect of causing tremors. So one of the side effects that we're going to watch out for is tremors during administration of a sympathomimetic bronchodilator, because that beta 2 also has that effect. And we talked about dopamine being there also. But that might be a place I could derive a couple of questions from. Just kind of a hint. Just saying. So how do I get bronchodilation to happen? How else could I do it? I could do a sympathomimetic, an adrenergic stimulation. How else can I accomplish bronchodilation also, we just talked about? A parasympatholytic or an anticholinergic. Both of them will accomplish the same goal. And we're going to find that we actually have three primary ways that we stimulate bronchodilation. One we're going to call a front door, one we're going to call a back door, and one we're going to call a side door. When we get to those. Once that has been stimulated, you don't want it to keep on being stimulated, so norepinephrine and epinephrine are either reabsorbed back into the axon where it was released from, or they're deactivated by two enzymes, and you should know these two, COMT and MAO. That's fine. If you want to call it catechol-O-methyltransferase and monoamine oxidase, knock yourself out. But COMT and MAO is just fine. Acetylcholine is deactivated by acetylcholinesterase or cholinesterase, same name. And the desired effect can occur due to stimulation of that neurotransmitter, or if I give a drug which inhibits the breakdown, obviously it's going to have a longer life. Does that last part make sense? If I don't break it down, it keeps on stimulating. So if I have something that blocks COMT or blocks MAO and inhibits that from breaking down the norepinephrine, the norepinephrine effect is going to be lasting longer. There's multiple ways to skin this goat or cat, whatever you want to skin. So here's an example of norepinephrine being released. Norepinephrine release stimulates these norepinephrine receptor sites and causes the effector, the desired effect. At the same time, then MAO is breaking down, or COMT is breaking down the norepinephrine to tie it up. Some of this norepinephrine is also reabsorbed back in, so there's a couple different ways that can be handled. Nice little picture. Yeah. So there you go. Sometimes that's the way life rolls.